Hello everybody and welcome to another creator-owned video. My name's Robbie. Today we're going to be talking about outlining your story and why it is important. And this is kind of just a craft perspective, so I think this can be applicable to anyone hopefully watching this video, but my channel does seek to cover storytelling from a comic book perspective. So I just want to be upfront with that. Outlining is typically part of your pre-production process, and it's not really something that you're going to be judged on, but it will be helpful if you're ever going to the pitching phase, especially because most of the major publishers request a synopsis of some kind, like a one-page overall story arc. So doing this work to understand the mechanics of your story is pretty helpful. Outlining can be helpful both in the idea generation phase or honestly in the revisionary phase too. This video, this is just on the idea of craft, and so I'm certainly not here to give anyone hard advice that you have to stick by. This is just what I have done and what has worked for me. If it helps you, great. But I am not laying down hard and fast rules here. So I just want people to be aware of that as well. So for example, in my experience as a writer, most of my life I have been what people would refer to as a discovery writer. And my process is kind of just I sit down with a blank page and I start writing. And it's very fun and very fulfilling for me because the ideas just kind of come very quickly and I start mapping it out, and I'm literally experiencing the story in real time, discovering, as the name implies, what happens. And there's times where I'm writing and a smile will come across my face, or I will be surprised at something that's happening in the story because the characters and their motivations, those things will present themselves to me, and I'm very grateful that is my experience with storytelling. Some people may not necessarily have that same luxury. It might be that some people just might have the desire to write, but it's harder for them to just kind of get going. And that's where doing something like an outline can be very helpful, because it can kind of give you the building blocks or the puzzle pieces to put things together so that when you're ready to get to the page, you have material, roughly what you're working with. So, and even before outlining, you can perhaps start with things like just getting the idea or the themes, the characters. Take some time to write character sheets, explore who your characters are, what are their characteristics, their mannerisms, what are they likely to do. That's something you can do in preparation for your story. And then you get to the actual outline here. An easy place to start with is just bullet points. And in my day-to-day life, I bullet point things at work all the time because I run a department and we have to know how to prioritize. And so I've really found that this is super helpful. So if you are doing a comic book, that it's probably going to be 6 issues, and you can sort of start there with most stories have a very logical kind of structure. This represents kind of the hero's journey, but this is a way of mapping things out in your story, for example. So if a comic book is going to be a trade, which a trade, one volume, is typically 6 issues, approximately 28 pages each, with approximately 4 to 7 panels per page. This is giving you some idea of the structure of what needs to happen and when. And so that's just a really easy place to start with okay, we know issue 1 is the inciting incident and what is going to happen. So Parker Peterson is bit by a radioactive spider. Spider. Is that too on the nose? Spider. Okay, he gets superpowers. And he explores those powers. It's really fun and exciting, right? Perhaps even in this first issue, we already have a consequence of that, you know. Uncle Sven unalives. But so, like, you know, those are like the basic beats. You can be like, okay, so these are the things like that need to like kind of occur in my story. And in the comic book, again, like 28 pages, like you probably get roughly like 5 or 6 scenes. So like, I guess that's easily divisible, you know, to navigate like what actions are going to happen and when. And then, I don't know, you can, sometimes I also find it helpful to know like the sandwich, if you will, or the bookends, is the writing terminology for it. But like, okay, what's our conclusion? Parker, you know, saves the girl next door, or like, you know, they fall in love. He avenges Uncle Sven. You know, like that's like the activity. I love how stupid this is, but that's the activity of like now we're getting some things together, and now, you know, like, okay, I have to connect these dots, and like that will help you fill in the gaps. And from there, I do think it would be important to like take things like a layer deeper and perhaps do like issue 1, you know, growing pains or something like that. And use this as the exercise ahead of, you know, now we have bullet points, so now you can elaborate on that. And so like, Parker Peterson is a teenage boy. He's not super popular. He's not strong. He gets picked on, like, etc. He gets bit by a radioactive spider. He gets superpowers. Yay. He is having fun exploring those powers and indulging in reckless abandon. He's exploring his powers, and all of a sudden, oh my goodness, wouldn't you know it, Uncle Sven gets shot, frowny face. Parker, you know, a dramatic moment at the end of the book, the issue, to keep us all engaged here. Parker adorns the guise of Man Spider and vows never let that happen again. And so, like, there you go. Like, there's your arc of like the first issue. Like, how do we get Man Spider, right? And then from there, it's a story we all know. And then from there, you can go on to, like, perhaps, you know, other lessons he learns of being Man Spider. Whether that's, I don't know, like having to be secretive with his identity or protecting the ones he loves, etc. Not that all comic books are superhero stories, that is, but you get the idea. And I do think this is really helpful to, like, to really start laying some things out this way, because again, like, this starts to give you the idea of like, what is the purpose of each issue? How am I building on the issue previous to this? Am I picking up what I'm laying down, and am I making the most of every opportunity? You know, is there something I can set up sooner in issue 2 or 1 to make sure that comes full circle by issue 6, and people think, wow, that was so thoughtful, it's almost like they planned it that way? You know, those are the, like, the opportunities you're looking for. So like, the more you understand about your own story, the stronger it's going to be. Like, you don't necessarily want, you know, even though I just gave all of this like superhero analogy, and just having it feel like serialized storytelling that's always moving forward. Like, we want to be able to come back to like the nice little things too that like helped us get there along the way. It's also kind of just important to have this understanding of your work because if you are going to end up pitching to like a publisher, they are going to ask for a synopsis of your story on one page that's like, you know, it's just the idea of like the story arc. You could probably just pitch, like if you're doing something that's serialized in multi-volume, you can perhaps just do what happens in volume 1 and just say, by the way, there's room for this to go on, you know, it's an ongoing story. I would probably just focus on the first volume, but make sure you understand the mechanics of your own story so people really understand like what are you trying to tell. Like most books, most material, like the narrative is one thing, but there's usually a message behind it that kind of like reinforces what makes it special. So all of this is like helpful to create like, you know, layers of material to help you get ready to embark on that first draft. But all that being said, like you don't necessarily have to do it this way, but you're probably going to have to come back and do something like this no matter what. So for example, as I mentioned, I'm a discovery writer, and I usually just sit down and start writing because I just want to get ideas out there. And there have been many times that I've then come back to the material, I know it in my head a little, and then I just rewrite it again and like sort of see like what makes the cut from like my memory, you know? Like the first thing I ever learned in like script writing classes was the professor told us at the beginning of the semester, you are going to write a movie, you know, like a feature length 120 page script, and you're going to throw it out. Like you are going to throw out this first draft of your movie because it's not good enough to be made into a movie yet. Like that's just kind of part of like, no one, you know, goes to the gym and lifts like the 300-pound deadlift weight. Like you have to build and train to get there over time, right? And so, you know, just because you wrote something doesn't mean you have to use it. And just because you paid for artwork doesn't mean you have to use it either. I'm actually a big proponent of that. Like, make your comic book, see it, read it, make sure it's functional, and like, make sure you're happy with it before you let it out the door, right? And so, you know, just to help convey this, like something I did was like after I wrote like my first real functional draft of my book, I went back and I just looked at everything that I had and I was like, okay, like what is happening here? Who are the characters? What are the locations? What are they discussing? What are the motivations? And like I just kind of started mapping all of that out, and I started creating like, okay, so if this is like issue 1, here's some of the beats. This is issue 2, here are the beats, like all the stuff building up to issue 6 which none of that's in there for you guys, but like you'll have to read the book when it comes out. But also like, you know, and then it helps me to put in things here for like what the first, you know, this is the first volume, the first half of the first volume, and then I'm going to have the second half of the first volume. Like I am putting all of the building blocks together. But this was like really interesting for me because I was able to go back and look at things like, okay, here's like where two characters interact with each other, and here's where they interact with each other again, and here's where like I was doing things to map out like the sequences that were happening over time. And that was really helpful because like when I went back and revised, and this is now becoming more revisionary than outlining, but like, you know, I was able to like go look at all of those scenes, make sure that they always moved the story forward, that we were building. And what I noticed like in my initial drafts was like they were kind of just placeholder. And so it did give me the opportunity to like make sure I was expanding on what was happening. I was expanding on the relationships. Things were getting deeper. We're adding more depth. And I found that really helpful. And something also that I learned about comic books and comic book storytelling was like, scenes, like, this isn't like a movie where, what you shot is what you shot and you're committed to it. Scenes in a comic are kind of like clipping sections out of a newspaper. Like, they are very flexible. Hi, Wallace. Everyone say hello to Wallace. Uh-huh. Yeah, buddy. Thanks for stopping by. We love you, Wallace. Um, anyway, so as I was saying, like, scenes in a comic book are kind of like clippings in a newspaper. They're sort of flexible, and I found like that was like something I had the potential to do, was to just like move things around. I think there's probably scenes that jumped entire issues, right? And for that part too, like, a lot of my sequences, even though I have like this serialized story that's like, we keep checking in on the ensemble cast, I could easily restructure this book to be like, one issue focuses on like characters, like 2 characters, and like their story for that part. Like, I could restructure it that way. But anyway, it's just like, because there's consistency, you can check in on characters, and like the tone of what's going on is usually similar enough that I have been able to move scenes around, right? Just like move dialogue to a different scene, because like ultimately what we are progressing towards is like the same thing again, these bookends. And so just wanted to share that because I thought that was actually, pretty interesting and like a pretty helpful bit of information. That's really all I have to say about outlining. Like, I read some stuff about this, like I watched a couple videos, and like most of the advice I saw was like, again, sort of flexible like this. If you're looking for hard and fast rules, I don't necessarily know if like outlining is something I would confine myself to like have to do correctly. But yeah, I do think that it's something that I would encourage people do. If you needed some takeaways from this video, again, like bullet points, know broadly what you're doing, know the bookends, expand on that, then build on to like paragraph or 1-page outlines of your material so you know what's happening. Like, start to collect the data that you have. Write multiple drafts. If you're not ready to do more than 1 draft of your book, you're probably not ready to publish your book yet. Like, so just some high level thoughts here for people who are, getting started on their journey, which is, what this channel mostly exists to do. That being said, though, I have noticed that the channel is getting some recognition from people with experience and people who have been published by major publishers as well. And so, hey guys, thank you everyone for being here. We just passed over 1,000 subscribers recently. Very, very impressed and humbled by the speed at which things are growing on the channel. I love hearing your guys' feedback. As I've said pretty much every time, I am not a professional comic book writer. I'm not published. Take every bit of advice I give you with a grain of salt, because I'm not, an authority in this space. But I am humbled to know that people find the information helpful and interesting, and it brings me great joy to know that, sharing my experiences and my creative process can help people, and it seems like it's working. So yeah, thank you all for being here. If you have a chance, please consider liking and sharing this video. That helps the channel tremendously. A share especially has the most value. It's really what kind of starts stimulating things, and so that goes a long way to help me. I would love to know what topics you guys want covered in the next video. I went live on Twitch last night and someone said less about publishing, and I kind of agree. I think publishing is an important aspect of it, but a lot of people treat it like you have to have a publisher lined up before you embark, right? And I don't think that's true. I don't think anyone has that luxury. And so I'll try and do more like this, like fun stuff. And yeah, I really appreciate anyone who's made it this far in the video, because I tried recording this video twice and just said, screw it, I'm going to go from the top of my mind and just talk until it's done. And it is done now, so I hope it was helpful. Had to get over that. This is the exact example of like pushing through writer's block, right? Yeah, everyone. So thanks again for watching. I hope it was helpful. I hope you were entertained, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Take care.